Finding the right podcast media host for you.
The School of Podcasting with Dave Jackson.
Hey, I'm Dave Jackson from the School of Podcasting, where I help you plan, launch, and grow your podcast. And today, I'm going to help you understand media hosts. And I realize there are so many. And if you've just started out, you can go into Facebook, you ask 28 people, who's the best media host? And you're going to get 28 different answers. And so what I want to talk about today is not, hey, the best media host is this one. Because the best one for me may not be the best one for you. So let's explain what the different options are so you can understand what those are, so you can then pick the perfect media host for your podcast. Because we kind of joke about this in podcasting. Every podcast answer, so if you ask a question, the answer is going to start with, it depends. And so what we need to do before we get into, well, here's one media host and here's another one and things like that, we need to make sure we understand what you need, because there's no sense purchasing a media host that has a bunch of features that you will never, ever use. So one of the things you need to ask yourself is, how often are you going to be publishing episodes? And then how long are they? And I'll explain why here in a minute. But then the other one is, what's your budget for your hosting? And things like, do you need, advanced dynamic content or private podcasting? If so, again, there's no wrong answers here. We just need to know up front. Or are you planning to monetize your podcast through advertisements? Again, nothing wrong with that. We just need to know this up front. Because when you answer these questions, it's going to help. You're going to have all these options, and all of a sudden it's going to narrow down, and it's going to make your decision easier and smoother. So some things to consider when you get ready. And the first one is, when do you buy a media host? And I realize this sounds kind of silly, but when you have media to host. Now, I used to work for Libsyn, and one of the things I would see that would always kind of make me scratch my head is somebody would buy a media host and they didn't have any media to host. So you were literally just lighting your, money on fire. Don't do that. When you're ready, you've taken that first episode, you've gotten some feedback on it, right? And people have said, oh, this is great. You should share this with the world. That's when you get a media host. And so some things, again, that you want to keep in mind as you make your decision. And one is the fact that there are two business plans in the podcasting space. And one, and this is used by Libsyn, Blubrry, Buzzsprout, and that is, their business model is, you can upload X amount of episodes per month. And then you can have an unlimited number of downloads. So you could be on, America's Got Talent or some huge, show. You've got a huge amount of exposure. Your bill isn't going to go up. You can only upload this much, but you can have as many downloads as you want. So that's one business model. The other one is, they do not limit however many episodes, how many shows you have. You can just upload all day long. The only time that your bill goes up is if you go over a certain number of downloads. And they don't pull down your show. They just raise your price. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about pricing a little later. But this is why you have to ask yourself, how long are my episodes going to be? And how often am I going to publish? Because if you're using that first business model that limits how much you can upload, but you can have as many downloads as you want, you need to know, okay, well, how big are these files? And so that's why you need to know, how many are you going to do and how long are they? And then the second one is, they're going to offer analytics and statistics. And this is key for tracking your show and tracking its growth. And so you're looking for a host, and this sounds kind of silly, but that offer, how many downloads did you get? You want to see that. And then there's an option to see geographic data. So where in the world is my audience? You can actually see where they are. And that's kind of handy if you ever want to go on tour. If you're a comedian and you're going to do a tour, you can see where your audience is, and that's where you need to sell your tickets. Now, I do want to point that out because most media hosts give you downloads and geographic data all in one. Libsyn separates that. You can get basic stats and then their advanced stats. One of the things they give you is geographical data. Now, the other kind of tool that is really handy is what I call episode comparison tools. And some people have a tool where it is, you'll pick episode 4, and then you compare it to episode 17 and episode 30, and you can see which one grew faster and who had the greatest number of downloads and things like that. That's in most hosts. And then there are people like Libsyn. I believe Blubrry has this, is where they'll have a 7-day column, a 30-day column, a 90-day column, and then a total column. And that makes it, again, really easy to see, is my show growing or not? But you want some sort of comparison tool. And then another feature is called IAB certification. Remember when I asked, hey, you need to know if one of the goals is to make money via advertising, because if you're going to get a BetterHelp, insurance, mattress people, whoever, they're going to want you on a host that is IAB certified, not IAB compliant. Some hosts still do this. They're like, oh, we're not certified, we're compliant. And that's kind of like being kind of pregnant. Like either you are or you aren't. You can't say I'm kind of certified. No. So you want somebody who is not compliant. You want them to be certified. So, and again, that's important if you plan on getting outside sponsorships. Then we get into distribution, and really every host, they're going to provide you with an RSS feed to distribute and syndicate your show to all the apps. So when they say things like, hey, come to us, we can get you into all the directories, we'll provide you with a feed, that's kind of like me going, hey, I'm going to be your server tonight. I will bring you a menu and bring you your food and make sure you have plenty of water. Isn't that kind of like a duh? I mean, that's what you do, right? So that is the baseline of every media host. They provide an RSS feed. They provide some sort of download statistics. That's like the bare minimum of a media host. So when they're like, hey, we'll get you in all the directories, you're like, yeah. But the one thing you want to be sure to avoid is there are some hosts that will go, and we will, if you want us to, we will put you in Apple for you. Like they're doing you a favor. But what they won't tell you is that like Apple and Spotify, Apple has stats that you can see how far people listened. And if you let somebody submit your show to Apple for you, it's going under their Apple ID, which means you haven't lost control of your show, but you have lost access to see those really cool stats. And I think that's kind of crappy when companies do that, just between you and me. So you always want to submit your show to Apple for you. Now, you can let your media host submit to Spotify because Spotify makes it pretty easy to say, no, that's mine, put it under my login. And you can do that with Apple. It takes about a day or two. It's not the end of the world. If you're like, oh no, I let them submit my show, it's not the end of the world. You just have to work with Apple to say, no, that's my show, put it under my login. And then you can see all the fun stats. Now, another fun feature is called dynamic content. And if this is something you're interested in, a lot of people hear dynamic content and they immediately jump to ads, and that's fine. That's often what they're used for. And what this means is that you can go, hey, at this point, insert this file. And many times that's an ad, but I just want to let you know it doesn't have to be an ad. On my show, I do the question of the month. So right now, as I record this, it's January 2025. And if I didn't do this dynamically, you could listen in January 2028 and you would hear the question of the month for January 2025. I put the question in dynamically, and then come February, I will say, hey, wherever I have the January question of the month, get rid of it and replace it with the February question of the month. Or maybe you're promoting a webinar and you're like, hey, everybody sign up for the webinar. It's coming on, March 12th. And then after March 12th, you swap that out with, hey, if you'd like to buy a copy of the webinar. So that's what dynamic content does. Now, some people go, I will never need that. I'm just, putting out information to my community. We're not doing any ads. We're not doing any self-promotion. None of that. If you don't need it, that's fine. But that's what dynamic content does. It can be very, very cool. And so Captivate has an amazing dynamic insertion tool. I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. We're going to talk about unique features. Buzzsprout also has a really cool dynamic tool. And in fact, Buzzsprout will actually put them in for you, and then you can move them. Captivate will suggest places where you can put them. And Blubrry's, it's a little less robust. You pay a little extra money and you can put in what's called a pre-roll, meaning they will put an ad in before your show starts. But again, you may not need this feature, but those are 3 companies that add them. Libsyn also has dynamic content, but it's for their enterprise solution. And for most people, it's out of their price range. Now, another feature that you might look for are transcription services. For example, Transistor, they offer free transcripts for their customers. But it's kind of like drugstores in America. There's one about every 20 feet. About every 20 feet, there's a new transcription service, whether it's Cast Magic, Otter.ai, Temi, however you pronounce that. So, but Transistor does offer them for free, but they're usually not that expensive. I know Captivate, you can get I think it's 5 hours for $1. It's ridiculously cheap. So, speaking of cheap and speaking of pricing, let's get to the bottom line. And the first thing I have to talk about, because I know you're going to go, hey, Dave, you haven't mentioned Spotify. Well, because they're free. And I get it. It's free. Let's talk about it now. Why doesn't free work? Because the free media host goes, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Podcaster, come over here. We're free. And this is how this works. We're going to host your files. And when you get big enough, we're going to go find sponsors for you. And then we're going to take a piece of that, and you can keep some of it too. And that will pay for all the free hosting that we've given you all these years while you were growing your show. Sounds great. And you're like, oh, wow, get hosting for free. Well, what happens is the podcaster spends all their time growing their audience, and they're like, hey, you can get sponsors now. And they're like, great, thank you so much. We're out of here. We're going to go pay, because I can now pay for it because I've got enough audience to monetize. We're going to go move over to Buzzsprout or Captivate or whoever, and they leave the free media host, and many of them, I'll put a list here, many of them have gone out of business because of this exact business model. Free is not a good business model. So keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to Spotify, here's the thing. There's a Netflix documentary on Spotify. They do not care about the people that make the content. They do not. They care about Spotify, and of course they should. It's a business. But I also do not trust them, because I'll give you an example. The one time they came out, they said, you can play whatever music you want in your podcast. And I remember hearing that announcement and like, what? I jumped out of bed like it was Christmas. And I'm like, I can play AC/DC. Yay. And I went over, and as I went to make it, there are always asterisks when it comes to Spotify. And so the first one was like, oh, by the way, this has to be in the app, not on the website. And you're like, okay. And they're like, oh, wait, one more thing. It's in the app, but only if you are a paying subscriber. If you're paying for Spotify, then you can hear your show. Otherwise, people aren't going to be able to hear your cool music show. And you're like, oh, well, okay, all right. And then they go, one more thing. We have to approve every episode. That is a whole lot different than, hey, everybody, you can play music in your podcast. Right now in January, they're like, hey, you can make big bucks with video on Spotify. And so the first thing, their criteria to even be able to make money is so much higher than YouTube. And then we're all like, yeah, but what do you get paid when you get paid? And we're still waiting for that answer. So for me, I love their music service. Love it. But I'm not a big fan of their platform. And in fact, they even took the word podcast. It used to be, first it was Anchor, then it was Spotify or podcasting for podcasters for Spotify, whatever it was. And now it's Spotify for podcasters. Now it's Spotify for creators. Just not a fan. And now you're like, but Dave, I need free. Really? Because Libsyn starts at $5 a month. We'll get into that. And if you can't afford $5 a month, said the guy who was gone bankrupt, you don't need a podcast. You need a job. And I say that with compassion. Again, I've been there. But if you really, really, really must have free, and remember, you kind of get what you pay for. RedCircle.com has a free plan that I would recommend. I would recommend the devil over Spotify. I just do not trust them. Love them as a music service, not as a podcast service. So Libsyn, cheapest, starts at $5 a month. Libsyn, by the way, the original media host. Like they started back in 2004. Rock solid. And I'm not saying that because I used to work there. I'm a happy Libsyn customer. So Libsyn is $5 a month. If you want stats with that, it's $7 a month. So that's one plan. And then you have Blubrry. And really all of these are great choices. It just depends on what you need. Blubrry starts at $12 a month. And these are all monthly fees, by the way. They're probably cheaper if you go by a year, although Libsyn doesn't have a yearly price. Buzzsprout starts at $12 a month. And those are all the business model, again, that limits how much you can upload, but you can have as many downloads as you want. So those are three companies that use that business model. Captivate is $19 a month for 30,000 downloads. That is a lot of downloads. That's when I said super popular. $19, as many shows, as many episodes as you want, and your bill will be $19 a month. And if it goes over $30,000 a month, it goes up. But that's a lot of downloads. Transistor, also $19 a month for as many shows, as many episodes. Their limit is a little lower, 20,000 downloads. And so just remember, cheaper isn't always better, but consider the features that you're getting for the price and how those features align with your goals. That's really the key. You don't want to buy a bunch of stuff that you don't need. So some additional features to keep in mind is you may have heard of Podcasting 2.0. And I always kind of describe it this way. There used to be cards back in the day, like in the 50s, right? You'd get tires, you'd get a steering wheel, and a brake and brakes and gas. That was it, pretty much, back in the day, right? And then they added additional features like, I don't know, a heater or radio or air conditioning or whatever it was. They added additional functionality. Well, right now, Podcasting 2.0 is a bunch of engineers and coders that are trying to add additional features to podcasting. In fact, Transcriptions, that's now in Apple, is a Podcasting 2.0 spec. So they're trying to add more features to podcasting. So you want to make sure that your media host has their ear to the ground and they're adding some of these features. They may not add them all. Some of them are a little niche, but Blubrry right now is in the lead of all the media hosts. They have 26 of these features in their platform. And then other companies like Captivate and Buzzsprout, Transistors puts them in. Libsyn right now is kind of lagging behind in that particular category, but it's one of those things to look into because eventually what will happen is either the apps will add these features and then the podcasters will put pressure on their media hosts to say, hey, we need this in, our dashboard so we can add this so it shows up in the apps. Or the media host will add them and then we'll all pressure the apps to put those features in. But it's going to move podcasting in a great direction. Now, another thing is if you're using WordPress on your website and you are all about WordPress all the time, then it's almost a hands down slam dunk. The media host you're probably going to use then is Blubrry. They offer a seamless integration through their PowerPress plugin, which is used on thousands and thousands of websites, and it make it really easy to manage your podcast really right from your website. You almost never need to log into blubrry.com. You can do it right from your website. Now, another unique feature, if you're on the go and you want to be able to check your stats, because we're all stat junkies, or if you just want to do some basic editing, Buzzsprout has an app. In fact, another unique feature, your audience can send you a text message through a special link that Buzzsprout puts into your episodes, and you can check that in this app. Now, you can't reply to them, but you can get those messages, and of course, you're then going to read those messages on your show. So that's unique to Buzzsprout. The app, the texting feature, it's actually pretty cool. Some other unique features, Buzzsprout, again, has a system to help you get advertising that pays way more than programmatic ads. Programmatic ads, I'm not a fan of. They pay anywhere from $2 to maybe $7. And so you're getting 0.002 cents a download. But Buzzsprout has a system that your show has to be 23 minutes long and you have to have X amount of downloads to be able to qualify. But they charge $20 to the advertiser and you get to keep 14 of that. And so 14 beats, 4 any day. So that is something they have built in. If you want to promote your show, if you're not using Buzzsprout as a host, you can go over and promote your show on other podcasts using that system. So you could use it as a podcaster or as a sponsor, but that's something that is currently unique to Buzzsprout. And I already mentioned, again, they have the app where you can check your stats and you can receive text messages. So that's kind of cool. Captivate has a really interesting tool where we talked about their dynamic ads. So let's say I had baked in an ad. Now, what does baked in mean? So I'm like, hey, welcome to the show. This show is brought to you by theschoolofpodcasting.com. Well, that's baked in. It's not dynamically inserted. I could later come in and highlight that part where I talk about the School of Podcasting and say from here to here, this is an ad. And I want you to replace it with this bit of content that talks about podcasthotseat.com. That, when I saw that actually work, I was like, that's some amazing technology. So their AI tool is very, very cool. They also, speaking of AI, and if you're using something like ChatGPT or CastMagic, Captivate has a cool AI tool. And what it does is it looks at your stats to see what worked and what didn't. And then it will suggest episode topics for the future. And when I tried this, it suggested something about being a guest on a show. And then it recommended people to interview on that subject. And the recommendations were really good. I was like, wow, that's pretty amazing, pretty cool. So Blubrry, talking of AI tools, they have tools that will help you prepare. They'll do show notes. It'll do the artwork, all this other fun stuff. And you're like, oh, that's kind of cool, but I'm on this other media host. Blubrry now enables you to buy just their AI tools without using them as a media host. So keep that in mind as you're making your decision. Again, the goal here is to buy the media host that best fits your need so you're not paying for things that you don't need to. So that's really the key. Now, a couple other things I want to point out is your media host does not really have anything to do with how quickly your show grows. And let me give you an example of this. Let's say we took a red Corvette and we put it on a flat, runway in the middle of Texas. I bet that particular car is going to go around 180 miles an hour. Wow, great. So then you take the same car and you go to, Maine. You're on a flat runway. That car is going to go 180 miles an hour. Why? Because it's not the runway. In the same way, it's not the media host that makes your show grow. It's your content and your marketing. It's not the media host. It is your content and your marketing. So as much as we're like, oh, I'm just going to move over here and we're going to go, money from heaven because I switched media hosts. No, that's not the way it's going to work. Now, some other things, some of these offer free trials. And so you could do that to kind of get in and check out the interface. And the interface, in some cases, might be something to look at. I'll give you an example. I have a little Toyota Camry. It's fine. My brother has a big family van. And if I was going cross country, I'm taking the van. It's just a better, got lots of cup holders, TVs, air conditioning, all sorts of great things. The big captain's chairs. It's just a more comfortable ride. And so you might want to sign up if they have a free trial to just kick the interface around and see what it looks like. Or you can go to YouTube, plenty of videos on these media hosts. So if you want to see what it looks like behind the scenes, if they don't have a free trial, go ahead and sign up. And after, 2 weeks, ask for a refund, because any media host that cares about their reputation, they're going to give you that refund. They should, at least. If they're not, shame on them. But that would also give you a way to track and test and kick the tires on a media host. So the goal here was to help you understand many of the features that are offered so you can pick the ones that, I need that, so you don't end up paying for media hosts that you don't the tools that you don't want. Now, I am going to have links under this video. Some of those are going to be affiliate links, but that's not why I mentioned them. In fact, all of these are great posts. It's just a matter of which one fits the best for you. And I'll have a link to, we talked about the podcasting 2.0 stuff. That's all under there, under the video. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you feel educated. And for some more education, well, check out this video here.